It's go time.
The preseason is coming down to its final weekend. We have a lot of news coming from a character who used to be in the CFL we need to discuss. Hi, everybody. Don Charbon along with Heath Graham. And we are listening once again to Johnny Manziel.
Johnny has come out with some comments about his time in the CFL and does not have a lot of really positive things to say, unfortunately, about the league. It's sad to hear these comments because so many players who have come up to Canada, whether they've had previous NFL experience or not, have had so many positive things to say. A couple of highlights from Manziel is that he felt like he was a pawn, that he was used by the league to get publicity, and it went negatively for him. Yes, he was a marketable name when he came to the CFL. He built himself up in college and was very well known, fizzled out quickly in the NFL. And for him to consider that he was being used by the league as opposed to the CFL giving him one more opportunity at pro football is a little bit tough as a CFL fan to take.
He could argue that, and maybe some players feel that way. Tell me that the NFL does not use the publicity generated by a Tom Brady, a Patrick Mahomes, you name it. Take your pick, Brock Purdy. There's a ton of that goes back and forth, quid pro quo. Most are fine with it because look at your opportunity. If you're coming to the CFL, you want to play football. Typically, that's your last avenue to get back to the NFL, and you're out. Manziel had that opportunity to make a name up here. If he did well, NFL scouts would be looking at him again. Didn't happen for him, and he blames the commissioner for this, which I find weird. But he sabotaged himself by basically failing his test to prove that he was alcohol-free. And he freely admits to that. He wanted out, fine. If you want out, get out. To disrespect the commissioner that way, like it was almost vitriol in this article on 3 Down Nation, where he had every opportunity to say great things about the players up here, great things about the defenses up here, but overall just be very sour.
What's really sad in all of this is the untapped potential of Johnny Manziel. He's still only 31 years old as we speak today. He had opportunities in the NFL. He had opportunities in the CFL. He did attempt a brief comeback with the AAFL and had a couple of games there. The league itself failed to take off. It actually folded. He had played 2 games and attempted 8 passes in that time. Last that he has stepped on a football field was the Fan Control League in 2021-2022. Still relatively young, and it's unfortunate the direction that his career has taken.
It is a sad story. You hoped that when a person of his stature coming out of the NCAA gets to the CFL, that they enjoy their time here, which he apparently did, but would succeed here, and it just didn't work out for him for whatever reason. Not everybody coming up here can adapt to this style of game. They will argue that it's quicker. I don't know if it's necessarily that, but you definitely have an extra player on defense to contend with if you're a quarterback. The other thing that you have to worry about is you've got a wider field, and an out in the NFL is one thing, and out in the CFL is quite another.
It is, and you have to take into consideration as well, it is a whole other country that these players are traveling to. Although we're very culturally similar to the US, there are some differences that take some time to adapt to as well. So if you're not 100% committed to it, you will struggle. And we've seen time and again other players that have come up after a stint in the NFL that speculation is they're going to come in and light up the league. And they see the talent level and they see the differences in the game. And not everybody that is a star in the NFL is suited for CFL style football. Johnny Manziel, by all accounts, given what he did in college, looked like he should have been a prototypical CFL type quarterback with his mobility and his creativity. But for several reasons, it just did not pan out.
For that, he has more answers than we'll ever know. Let's move away from Johnny football. Janarian Grant is now a Toronto Argonaut. one of the off-season moves that caught a lot of people by surprise. The Bombers last year had signed him just prior to the season starting. Most thought that was going to be the play again, and yet this time it's the Argonauts.
This is a great pickup for the Argos and a big loss for the Blue Bombers. We saw Javon Leake have a breakout season with the Argonauts last year. He has now uprooted to the Edmonton Elks. Janarian Grant coming on board with the Argonauts is a great way to shore up that return game for them. I think part of this is probably the financial situation that the Blue Bombers see themselves in. They're very tight to the cap, didn't have a lot of room left. As exciting and electrifying as Janarian Grant is, I just don't think they could agree to a salary that both sides were happy with.
The Argonauts were pilfered in the offseason. A lot of money went out the door with players that they could not bring back, and they went via free agency to Ottawa, to Hamilton, to Saskatchewan. That gave them some room under the cap to pick up somebody. And let's face it, anytime Janarian Grant has the ball on a kick return, people take notice.
The Bombers are going to have to find a diamond in the rough here to get back to what they had with Janarian Grant. We saw last year when he was injured, they struggled on returns, and I don't know if anybody has shown any kind of flashes in camp that can compete with what Grant has done. 8 return touchdowns in 41 CFL games is a pretty solid number, and all-star in that special teams return game.
The BC Lions released David Menard. They go out and sign Demetrius Taylor. Now you think, who's Demetrius Taylor? Well, he was a member of the Detroit Lions. Why is that significant? He's coming off a suspension for gambling in the NFL.
A little bit surprising to see Menard released. He's a pretty big name as far as defensive linemen in the CFL. We'll see what happens, and we've had discussions previously about the stigma of sports gambling and what that means to the professional leagues. Suspended by the NFL, but I'm happy to see Taylor get a chance and a second life here in the CFL to see if he can rejuvenate his career.
Agreed. We should not live in a cancel culture. If you make a mistake, atone, make amends. And this is his chance now to do something about it. He was a rookie when it happened. He's now in his mid-20s. He's definitely more mature. In his case, I hope that he's learned his lesson and that he'll do well with BC. Menard wound up in Hamilton, the Tiger Cats signing him. Of course, they had lost Ted Laurent to retirement, so you get a Canadian coming in on that defensive line for a Canadian who vacated.
That's an important pickup for the Hamilton Tiger Cats as well. That provides them some instant veteran Canadian talent on the defensive line. Great pickup, and you knew when you saw a name like Menard being released by a team that it wasn't likely to be that he's sitting idle for long.
Now, sad news out of Calgary, Malik Henry, for the second season in a row, is going to miss a season of football. Last year he got in a couple of games, but during the third game he blew out his Achilles. This time it's a patella tendon injury. He is likely not to play in 2024, and for the Stampeders, that is a crushing blow because they were really hoping to have him back in the lineup.
It is, and you have to wonder what the football future is for Malik Henry at this point. That is 2 very major leg injuries and losing significant amount of time over the course of 2 seasons. I don't want to speculate, but you have to think teams are going to have a really long look at his health records before they consider giving him another contract offer.
It's one of the most important things in any sport, that your most important asset is availability as much as durability. Here is a bad situation for him. I hope that he finds a way back. We've seen with some players that they've had major setbacks and still had a good career after that. Nothing precludes it, but yes, when it's 2 severe leg injuries in consecutive seasons, you do worry. Interestingly, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers not going to play Zach Collaros in their final preseason game. He didn't see the field in their first one. Protecting him, but does that hurt him in any way?
You would think at this point in Zach Collaros' career, he knows how to get himself game ready. Yes, you would like to see him take a couple of snaps in game action, even in preseason, but the Bombers traditionally in the Mike O'Shea era have gone out of their way to protect those veterans and give them time to rest and recuperate. They must be happy with what they've seen in camp so far and know that he is going to be game ready for week 1 of the regular season. I don't see it being too much of a controversial issue. It's not overly surprising given what Mike O'Shea generally likes to do with the veteran players.
We've seen it with players even on the run up to playoffs where they've been away from practice just to let the veterans heal up and rest up. And O'Shea is huge on that. It does make me wonder a little bit if maybe they're just being a little overprotective of him at this point in time, because even a quarter, what are the odds? That would just get him a little bit used to the rhythm of a game. Michael Domagala is out as the kicker in Ottawa, which wasn't a huge surprise. Given that Lewis Ward was going to be coming back to full health, it was going to be a case where Domagala was probably looking for another spot to land. And of course, that gets very tough at this time of training camp when you're a kicker.
It does. I would anticipate a player like Michael Domagala is going to get some looks if a kicker for a team struggles early on in the season. He's not likely to land on another roster before the regular season starts unless there is a team that is really concerned about their kicking game. 2 or 3 weeks in, if a guy has gone 2 for 5 or 2 for 6 on field goal attempts, don't turn your ringer off because you're likely to get some calls.
If you look at what's been going on with Brett Lowther in Saskatchewan, maybe the Rough Riders might be thinking, although Lowther has typically started slow and then improved, but it is uncharacteristic for him to miss so many field goals so far. Speaking of the Rough Riders, of course, they're done with their preseason schedule. They've won both of their games. Now that they can focus on training camp for the rest of the tour, of course, it's worth remembering that CFL Cutdown is 10 p.m. local time, June 1st. There is 2 interesting sidelights that have come out of this. One, they haven't released anybody really from their training camp roster. There's been the odd dribs and drabs, but nothing significant. And the second part of it is Corey Mace is still being very tight-lipped about who is going to be the backup to Trevor Harris in Saskatchewan. You've got Mason Fine, who's had a great one preseason game anyway. He was taken out for precautionary reasons against Winnipeg, but he played well against Edmonton. And then, of course, you got Shea Patterson, who has put up some great numbers as well. Is the person on the outside, is it Jack Cohn or is it Antonio Pipkin? And Pipkin has not completed a pass in any of his attempts in preseason.
You would have to think Antonio Pipkin might be the odd man out here. You look at cost savings, and it might come down to dollars and cents. Pipkin has been around the league 8 seasons. It's similar to Dakota Prukop being released earlier this week as well. What does he bring to the table that these other guys don't, other than a few years of experience? But you've already got Trevor Harris. I don't feel that you really need that veteran presence for Pipkin. It is going to be interesting to see if they are going to go with Patterson or with Mason Fine as their second stringer. I'm speculating maybe Patterson gets the nod as the number 2 guy, but we'll have to see what Corey Mace has up his sleeve.
If you look at quarterbacks now, especially in the third string spot, they have almost become exclusively third down, push the pile running backs. In Calgary's case with Tommy Stevens, he does it expertly. He's probably the best out there. But if the game came down to it and you needed a quarterback to carry you for a half or 3/4 of football, are you satisfied with what you've got as your third string? And this is my question. Is Antonio Pipkin your guy if both Harris and the number 2 go out? Do you want him to be guiding that offense?
And you have to also start looking at your quarterback of the future. With Trevor Harris being 38 years old, how much longer is he going to be the guy? And then you have to consider, is your number 2 guy the future, or do you want to develop one of those young quarterbacks and give him the experience and hope that he sets up well and can step into that starting role at some point? You look at what the Blue Bombers did with Drew Brown. It was a very similar situation for him. He paid his dues behind Collaros and Sean McGuire, got into that number 2 role, And now he is likely the starting quarterback for the Ottawa Redblacks on week 1 of the season. That's a situation where they had that young guy in that backup, in that short yardage role, promoted him and brought him along over the course of a couple of seasons.
Ottawa, I think, is in the same sort of situation where they've got 4 quarterbacks that have all got some pedigree. You've got Jeremiah Masoli, you've got Drew Brown, you've got Dustin Crum, and you've got Tyree Adams. That's a real tough room to go through and decide who is not going to be a participant going forward. And one of those guys, whoever it is that gets cut, is probably going to wind up on another roster.
You would have to think it's going to be either Dustin Crum or Tyree Adams. I believe, given the youth of those 3 quarterbacks, that Jeremiah Masoli is still going to be a valuable asset to the Red Blacks, unless they can convince Masoli to retire as a player and stick around in some sort of quarterback consultant role or something like that and help develop all 3 of the young guys.
I wonder if the Red Blacks are listening, and maybe they'll take you up on it. One thing that Masoli provides, well, speaking of which, Taekwon Manziel has been released by the Lions. One thing that Masoli provides is leadership. He is a guy that people gravitate toward in a locker room. You can't rid that. You need to find a way to keep him around.
You do, and I was just purely speculating here at this point. I do see the value of Jeremiah Masoli still as a quarterback, as a regular roster player on the Red Blacks. I'm not in that room. I'm not Sean Burke. I don't know those conversations that are going to happen, but it's interesting to think about. You've got 3 quarterbacks in their mid-20s, all fighting for scraps at this point, and you've got Masoli there as the guy that's been through it all.
If you're Jeremiah Masoli, you're probably going to be continuing as that mentor role with Drew Brown. Most likely, if Drew Brown falters, that's when you step up and you take the reins in a support role. But given the money that they've spent on Drew Brown, he is their quarterback of note for the future, and it's up to him to bring that franchise around. And if their preseason game against Hamilton proved anything, well, maybe they're stepping in the right direction.
Dustin Crum took the majority of the snaps in that one. He had 10 completions out of 16 attempts for 108 yards and a touchdown. Drew Brown in limited action went 4 for 6, 26 yards, moved the sticks and controlled the ball well. That's what you want to see from that guy. It'll be interesting to watch their second preseason game, and if Tyree Adams and Dustin Crum get a majority of the snaps, you have to think that the evaluation is, which one are we keeping as number 3?
Caleb Evans for the Alouettes did his best Terrell Ford impression by running backwards and forwards all across the field before finding a receiver in the end zone against the Argonauts. The Alouettes winning big in that game at home. Coming up right after the bumper, it's Derek Taylor, and Heath and I will be discussing with him in this first of 2 parts that we're going to have for you. The next episode, episode 240, will be the second part. We'll be talking about our ideas about who's going to finish where in the East. In episode 240, it'll be who's going to finish where in the West. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Jamie Reinhold from TSN, producer, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble.
Derek Taylor, the man with the details. And Derek, we're going to put you on the spot. We're going to try to sort out who's finishing where in the Canadian Football League this season.
All right. I like it. I have some wagers on just this kind of thing, so I think I'm ready.
Ooh, he's already got the betting hand played. All right, that's good. Well, let's go. Let's try to sort out the East before we head back to the juicy stuff in the West. Montreal's on an 8-game winning streak as they start 2024. They are the defending Grey Cup champions. Does anybody unseat them from first place?
Are they good? Last year, leading into the playoffs, they had beaten the teams below them, and they were 0-7 against the teams above them. They beat the Argos because the Argos... Montreal did. I mean, Montreal, okay, the return by, I think it was Letcher, was fantastic, but did they win, or did the team with 9 turnovers lose the game? Then they beat the Bombers. Like they took the Bombers. They were down 10 at halftime and came back to beat the Bombers. That's a real win. That's a real W. So I just think I look at 21 games worth of evidence and I go, are they good? To me, they're certainly not great, but are they good? And without Austin Mack, are they good? Their offense for a real spell last season was just Fajardo lobs it up and Austin Mack brings it down. And Austin Mack is in the NFL for just that reason. Can Tevin Jones be that guy? What about Tyson Philpott being back? Reggie White? They are getting guys who aren't free agents back into their lineup that will help them improve, but are they good? So they have the advantage of Toronto is without Chad Kelly for a minimum 9 games. Hamilton doing I don't know what, but I do believe in Scott Milanovich. And Ottawa, let someone in Ottawa be healthy for 5 minutes, and Ottawa could be a really good team because that offense is stacked with weapons. Even despite losing their running back to the 6-game injured list, Devontae Williams. I want to believe in Ottawa because I've been on the Ottawa bandwagon for years now, and they keep disappointing me. 2022, 2023. I don't know. Like it's kind of a in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king kind of feeling to it. Like they might be the best, but I just don't know if I think they're going to be good. They lost some talent. Lemon's not back. Lemon was such a master, was such a stud for them. I don't know about Montreal, man.
I'm with you on Ottawa, Derek. I have been high on them for the last several seasons, and every year I look at my season preview predictions and just shake my head and go, where did this all go wrong?
Quarterback got injured.
Excited for Drew Brown to get that opportunity in Ottawa. Now, going back to the question about Montreal and are they good? Is that even really the question, or is it just, is there anybody else in the East that is going to be as good?
That's it, and that's a very good point. Like Montreal definitely has some high-end talent, and Fajardo in the playoffs was dynamite. In the regular season, it was 16-14 touchdown reception, something like that. Marc-Antoine Dequoy, awesome. Stubblefield, fantastic. Just looking across this roster, I'm a big Nafees Lyon guy. Darnell Sankey and Tyrese Beverett will hit everything that moves. Mustafa Johnson is an absolute beast in the middle. They went and got Lemon for a reason last season. Now it's Isaac Adeyemi Berglund, Avery Ellis. I don't know what they have off the edge if Lemon is suspended or can't return. Not the biggest on their offensive line. I'm not the biggest running back guy, but where are they going to go at running back this season? I guess Kadeem Carey, but what will his health be? Yeah, that's why, the one-eyed man thing is maybe the way to go. I don't think Hamilton's going to be good. Toronto, man, you don't have your quarterback, and it's the Cameron Duke show. They might just be, I can't bring myself to bet against them to win the East in the regular season just because of the reason you mentioned. Who else can we really count on Ottawa to get there?
And Ottawa, since they were in the Grey Cup in 2018, are 14-45. So it's time to put up. They have to do something to get that fan base excited.
Yeah, that roster in 2019 was awful. Awful. That was some of the worst GMing I ever saw in my lifetime. Hey, Trevor Harris and Greg Ellings, just go away. Really? We would like to stay. No, you go ahead and go away. Okay, that's a choice. I was proud to say I thought they'd be the worst team in the CFL and nobody was buying it. And then they went 2-0 to start that season, and then they lost 14 in the next 15 or whatever it was. And I'm like, okay, well, it turned out to be okay. I just think that they've been undone by injuries and multiple quarterback injuries the last couple seasons. Can I interest you in Dominic Rhymes, Braylon Addison, Justin Hardy, Jalen Acklin, insert Canadian here. They picked Nick Mardner second overall if he eventually takes that job. Can I interest you in that as an offensive attack if those guys are all healthy?
I wouldn't go to the wall with it, but if Drew Brown can work with it, that's all that really matters. Is that right?
Drew Brown, they do have Jeremiah Masoli still there. Tyree Adams flashed in the game that he started and unfortunately tore his ACL. But Drew's the starter, right? You pay him that money, he's going to be the starter. And yeah, as he goes, as the offensive line goes, so will go Drew Brown. I really like Drew Brown. I'd said in advance, that's the kind of contract I would pay him, 2 years and $700 in total, because he's got some stuff. He's not a big guy, doesn't have the biggest arm. He can do some stuff out of the pocket when the play breaks down. He makes good reads. Zach Collaros is very high on him. You trust Zach Collaros with putting you out on how quarterbacks are. I love the fact they picked up Drew Brown but now you got to do it. Now you're the lead dog, right? So you got to pull the sled now.
Well, the other thing too that they're facing Dante Bull.
He was rough when he got his starts last year for first overall pick. You wanted a little better. Stories were he was a little out of shape, I guess. There are not a lot of good tackles in the Canadian Football League. If you have some, you hold on to them like grim death. So if Dino Boyd turned into something, pardon me, not Dino Boyd, if Dante Bull turned into something and something special like a first overall draft pick, they would be elated.
Absolutely. So does that leave Ottawa in last, or does that bring them up enough to make playoffs?
Hamilton. Oh, Hamilton. What's Hamilton doing at quarterback?
You've got Taylor Powell up for another year. You've got Bo Levi Mitchell, who may have a leg, but I'm more worried about his shoulder than I'm ever going to worry about that leg.
Yeah. Do they have 2018 Bo Levi Mitchell?
There's the question.
If they have that guy, I'm in. I'm in on Hamilton. But it's been so long. And then, I mean, weapons there are just Tim White is awesome. End of list. I'm going to war with Omar Bayless. Keandre Smith is going to bust out. Keandre has some moments, fine. Luther Hakunavanu, if they're going to start him at the Z. I don't want to say I've never. It's tough to remember a guy who struggles with open deep balls more than Luther Hakunavanu has in his CFL career. It's really strange to watch. They got Brendan Larry Orange from the Bombers, fine with that. James Butler, I like fine at running back, but I only think the running back game is so important. At defense, they did pick the Argos bones a little bit, so I like that. You add guys like Hendricks and Barlow and Jamal Peters on the corner. That's nice. I kind of don't see where they're putting up points. That's my biggest concern about Hamilton and why I think, okay, they might pull up the rear in that East Division.
Looking at Toronto, we mentioned the Cameron Dukes show. Nick Arbuckle has recently been picked up this week as well. Does that stabilize the quarterback situation in Toronto at all, pending the return of Chad Kelly at some point this season?
I like it. I'm not like a Nick Arbuckle truther, but he's a smart dude who understands how to play football in this league, even if he can't necessarily do it when he gets on the field and gets under pressure. But if Cameron Dukes goes down, you have Nick Arbuckle there, who I feel like can keep the ship headed in the right direction until Chad Kelly comes back. If Nick Arbuckle was going to be the starter for the full season, I would be concerned just because he's had chances and it just hasn't, apart from Calgary, in that relief spell for Bo in 2019, it hasn't happened for him. Hasn't had the best situations, blah, 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 but it just hasn't happened for him. And I start to wonder if it's ever going to happen. So, I think it's a very nice second option that, do you keep him around when Chad is back? We'll see. But in the meantime, this is a guy. There weren't a lot of veteran guys that we could go get, apart from if Taylor Cornelius was interested. Maybe that was a direction. You suspect they would have investigated that. But yeah, no, I like the Nick Arbuckle signing for what it was. I don't expect him to lead me, but he'll certainly help out a young guy who's trying to keep everything warm until Chad comes back. If Chad comes back.
As dominant as the Argos were last year in the regular season, and they set some records for wins, are they crossing their fingers and hoping for a 500 record until Chad comes back? Is that kind of the goal?
I think that'd be great, right? Because they got cracked in free agency, losing their defensive coordinator for one, who feels like, I don't know the Argos organization, but I mean, that guy has some followers. Like, I absolutely love him. And now Corey Mace is the head coach in Saskatchewan. All the defensive studs, a lot of the defensive studs have been taken away. Arimalade's still there. They bring in Jake Seresna in a trade. Robbie Smith, good. Sean Oakman in spots. Wynton McManus, yes, please. They bring in Tunde Adeleke, who you hope is healthy. But they got whacked in free agency. And I'm big on talent is going to tell me, like on-field talent is going to tell me how well you perform. It's still not a great receiving core. If Kevin Mattal, their first-round draft pick, is up to speed right away, then I like it a lot more because, hey, DeVaris Daniels, yes. DeMonte Coxey, fine. Rasheed Bailey, yes. Dejon Brissett, yes, but he might get stuck in that Z position. I just don't see a team overloaded with offensive talent, so you kind of need the quarterback to make that go. You have the offensive line to get ready to go. Yeah, 500 till Chad Kelly gets back. I think if I'm an Argos fan, I'd be super happy with that.
Is there lightning in a bottle, say that John Murphy goes out and finds another Quantez Stiggers and helps out that defensive secondary?
I guess I would say, how many have there been? And right, like the Bombers would go find another Dalton Schoen, or D. Alford was only in Winnipeg for 1 year. I just don't think those guys exist, right? They found Mason Pierce and brought him in last season, and that guy looks like the real deal at halfback. I like him just fine. Deshaun Amos with some injury troubles. Tavares McFadden can hold things down in the back, but I just think you might find Quantez Stiggers, but if you're relying on that, you're doing it the wrong way, right? Just because those guys do not. Think of the guys that had Stiggers impact or more in the last couple of years. Like you're talking Quantez Stiggers, Austin Mack, Dalton Schoen, DeAndre Alford went to the NFL immediately, didn't have 10 interceptions or anything, but there are very few and far between when you pull out just young rookie American dudes.
If you're going 1 through 4, you got where? What have you got? Who? Sitting where?
Okay, hold me back. Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Hamilton.
Wow, Ottawa on top.
I think Ottawa, Montreal are I think they're in the same tier. Toronto, because of the Kelly thing, are in their own tier, and I think Hamilton's in a third tier for me. I think that's the way. I just think Ottawa can't keep having bad things happen to them. It's statistically improbable that they have to go so far down their depth chart every bleeping year that I just think this is their time.
That's cool. I like that optimism.
You're not buying it. I don't think you're buying it.
I've been down that Ottawa train, and I don't know if it's leaving the station just yet. Maybe it will, and I hope it does. But what is it going to take? 10 wins for them to get first place in the East? 11?
Didn't they win it like 8, 9, and 1 year? Like, yeah, it's going to take 10 wins. They lost one score game. Go ahead.
Yeah. The East, though, at that time was getting throttled by the West in the crossover games. Not so much last year. The East won that battle, so they may be better than we think.
Yeah, they did good things in free agency. That defense, Money Hunter was hurt most of last year. I think that guy's one of the top corners in the league. Darius Pickett comes to be your dime from Toronto. That guy, monster. Javon Santos-Knox makes every tackle in the world. Frankie Griffin runs around 1,000 miles an hour. Will they be able to pressure the quarterback? Well, okay, Lorenzo Malden didn't have 18 sacks, whatever that was this past season, but they have some talent up front with Wakefield and Lang and Carter. You go, okay, well, I see what's happening here. They can cover, and their offense, done right, their offense should be fantastic. Tommy Condell's offense. So, yeah, I just think, and everything we say today, right, is prefaced by if the starting quarterback is healthy. If the starting quarterback is healthy and people want to come back 5 weeks later and go, you're wrong. Well, because Trevor Harris got hurt. Of course, Saskatchewan can't win football games. Their quarterback got hurt. But man, when we get to the West, like if quarterbacks are healthy, there's going to be some contenders.
I've got Montreal winning first. 12 wins probably gets it there. Toronto, Ottawa, to me, are in a dogfight for second and third. And then Hamilton brings up the rear. And no crossover in the playoffs.
Okay. Where does Montreal get 12 wins from when they don't play a terrible Ottawa team 4 times?
Well, that's the thing. They've got to prove that what they did last year at the end of the season was no fluke, that they weren't beaten on the chumps, that they could actually go out and do what they did to Winnipeg in the Grey Cup to other teams. That's what I'm predicating this on.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you.
I'm taking Montreal to win the East. Hamilton, I don't think is going to be as bad as you predict. I've got them in second, Toronto third. I'm selling on Ottawa this year, which means they will probably go 15-3 and run away with it. But I've got to put them in the cellar until they prove me wrong because I've been bitten too many times.
What's got you higher than me on Hamilton?
I think Taylor Powell as their quarterback showed enough last year. And with Bo Levi Mitchell still in the mix, they're going to be competitive. I've got them at 9-9. I don't have them as a top contender, but I think they're going to do enough to be a 500 club, and that's going to get them in second just because of the unpredictable situation in Toronto, and Ottawa still has a lot to prove.
I'm with you on Taylor Powell. I'm afraid they're going to not let that happen, and they're going to go with Bo, and that scares me a lot from Hamilton's perspective. If they have to go with Taylor Powell, I like their chances more because I'm with you. He showed some stuff last year that I went, Oh, okay, with some healthy receivers and a healthy offense, and Jordan Murray locked in for long term at right tackle. Okay, I see this. Okay.
Well, the other thing that Powell gives you is mobility back there. Bo is going to be just a sitting duck. So I like Powell better in that situation as well. Let him develop in that position and let him be the man for the future.
That's one of the interesting things with Bo is when he was original Bo, like it was he and Zach Collaros that were the best at keeping pressure from turning into sacks, which seems totally counterintuitive because Bo doesn't scramble, right? But he's like I'm standing in the middle of the freeway and okay, I'll just move here and I'm fine over here and then, okay, then bang, he would hit you. But the last few years, I watched Bo and I'm like, I don't think your arm is going along. Like his head thinks I can make this throw, and his arm goes, no, you really can't anymore. And he hasn't kind of put those two things together to make himself into late career Peyton Manning. When Manning couldn't throw the ball at all, he figured it out. And I was like, okay, well, I can't do this. Ricky Ray couldn't throw the ball more than 45 yards downfield. That's Hall of Famer. He really figured out, okay, well, I can't do this, but I can do this. Bang, bang, boom. And to me, Bo still thinks he can be the original Bo, which, no.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at Third Down Gamble. Join us again, the Third Down Gamble podcast, audio worth watching.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources provided by Canadian Football League player and game statistics for analytics, game notes, and statistics, and 3downnation.com for news, insight, and in-depth analysis. Please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com for the most up-to-date information on the Canadian Football League.